Welcome to Gold and Black Live. We got smarter, I think. Tom and Brian Newberg joins us, but Seth Morales, pretty sharp guy too. That was I thought if you missed that and you're just joining us now, make sure you go back and watch the replay of that. Brian, we're a couple weeks away from the start of football. We are 4 or 5 days away from the official start of men's basketball. You've been doing this for a long time. This is a new, I don't know, we don't want to use train wreck, but we always talk about October, November being those crossover months in this business, but just a different thing. I mean, you're going to have them both starting up and both going at it pretty heavily at the same time with men's basketball and football.
Yeah, and it's a hell of a lot better than what it was 2 months ago, where you didn't know if anything was going to happen ever. And, it's great that it's back. And, now you're going to have football starting up at a non-traditional time, whereas normally, basketball wouldn't start up until right around the end of the season. I haven't been to an IU game in a couple of years in football because I'm always in Florida or Hawaii or some such horrible place because I'm with basketball for their November tournament. But it's going to be a very interesting next couple of weeks after a very distinctly uninteresting last 6 months.
Yeah, you always have good stories on guys, and obviously with Seth Morales, anything that jumps off the page, I mean, obviously the catch, but Seth Morales was an interesting guy in your days of covering Purdue football, the earlier days, but anything that you recall directly from him that is something that is a lasting memory for you?
Just remember that, like, when he showed up for Butler and had to redshirt his first year at Purdue, I think they were pretty aware right away that he was gonna help them right away. Obviously not the most physically talented guy in the world, but he could run and he could catch the ball. And that was a point in time too where Purdue was trying to get a higher caliber of wide receiver. It wasn't necessarily going as they hoped it would go, and that created a lot of opportunities for guys to come in and fill voids. And if there was ever an opportunist, in the modern history of Purdue football, it would probably be Seth Morales, because obviously, Purdue may not go to a Rose Bowl without him. He obviously made one of the biggest plays, one of the most iconic plays in Purdue football history. And that's kind of a matter of a guy just kind of, falling into Purdue's lap and being in the right place at the right time. They've had a couple of guys like that over the years, Nick Hardwick, being another one. But he was a great program guy, obviously was always ready when his number was called, so to speak. Was a little bit fortunate in terms of he came to Purdue right around the time where the quarterback was pretty good. And, that obviously was a big deal for his college career. But obviously a great story, obviously a great guy, and, left a legacy at Purdue, whereas a lot of guys who came from where he came from in terms of moving up a level from a place like Butler wouldn't necessarily have a chance to leave a legacy.
Yeah, incredible. Hey, Brian, segueing to 2020 here, Boilermaker football, you had some interesting points, I thought, in your weekly word posted a few days ago on the quarterback situation. There's a position that needs to be sorted out. We all know that. There's Jack Plummer, Aiden O'Connell, and, of course, the wild card, we like to call him, Austin Burton, the UCLA grad transfer. And it's going to be fascinating to see how the coaching staff arrives at a decision here. And I think it'd be fun to hear how you think maybe this thing could sort out, maybe some of the things that you read into the situation.
Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of assumed Purdue is going to lean toward Jack Plummer just because he was the starter before he got hurt. But there is one enduring truth that kind of hangs over all of this, and that's the fact that, Purdue wasn't going to recruit a graduate transfer quarterback unless they felt like that player could come in and help them. And that player is not necessarily going to help them just by holding a clipboard on the sideline. The other side of that is a graduate transfer quarterback's not going to come to a place where he doesn't think he has a chance to start. So Purdue must have given him compelling reason to believe that he would have every opportunity to come in here and win this job, which might suggest now, obviously Purdue, had to cover itself against, obviously Jack Plummer's coming off an injury and whatnot. You had to cover yourself with numbers. But would Austin Burton come to a place where he felt there was a real chance that he was going to be nothing more than numbers? Probably not. So there might be a natural inclination inherent in Purdue right now toward Austin Burton. I think his skill set maybe is kind of one of a kind on this roster. Purdue might want to have that sort of more mobile element if he does in fact provide that. That's kind of his reputation. The deterrent there with Austin Burton has always been obviously how quickly can he learn the offense. He has no experience at Purdue. He got here in July, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's a lot on his plate to learn in a very short period of time. Now, if Purdue is naturally inclined to play him or give him every opportunity to play, perhaps you tweak things accordingly in his direction. I don't know, but the reality is that Purdue would not have recruited a graduate transfer, and a graduate transfer would not have come to Purdue if there wasn't some compelling reason to believe that he was going to have every chance to win this game, to win this job one way or another. And that's what's going to be fascinating about this. I still think Plummer makes a lot of sense. I think he did enough good things last year to believe his future at Purdue is bright. He seems to be healthy from everything I understand. Not that I would be the authority on those matters, but there is that consideration with Austin Burton too, that, hey, he's here for a reason.
Yeah, and that is and you have to think as much emphasis as Purdue is going to be need to play on an offense that can put some points up and do it in different ways with several receivers and get it done. This Burt may give them something that the other two guys don't have. That's what's going to be an interesting storyline to watch. Yeah.
One other quick point to make about that. One of the really, really important parts of this season for Purdue offensively is they've got to invigorate their running game one way or another.
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to be an offense anytime soon that can just hand the ball off and blow people off the line of scrimmage and do it that way. I think you have to get creative. I think you have to be innovative. You have to do things outside the box a little bit. You have to generate running productivity from different places. If that's the quarterback, that might be part of it. Purdue has been kind of interested in recruiting in more of a dual threat sort of guy over the years. And I think they're doing that because of that reason. They want to invigorate their running game one way or another. If Austin Burton can potentially be that guy, that might be a big check in his column too.
Yeah, Jack Plummer actually showed a little bit last year. Now, again, he also got hurt, but he also showed that he could run it a little bit. It's going to be interesting. He's at least athletic enough to do it, but again, coming off that injury. All right, men's basketball. Tease it up, so to speak, for I guess officially, though I'm always confused on when that comes to pass. But it's the October 14th. The storyline there is an interesting blend. 5 new guys, I guess. Is that right? That we're talking about that will come in and make a difference, may make a difference. But tell us about what your early expectations are for Matt Painter's team.
It's pretty much unknown, to be honest with you. I don't know if Purdue's had a team that's this much of an unknown commodity probably since 2014, when they weren't very good for 2 years in a row. They brought in a bunch of freshmen, and things went well that year. But Purdue, Matt Painter always seems to get the benefit of the doubt nowadays. He's earned that he's going to find a way to generate a good team, and I think he's very much deserving of that. But I think this team has more to prove than a lot of the teams that have come before it, obviously, because of what happened last year. I mean, it's not the final record that really stands out as much. It was the inconsistency, the lack of competitiveness, the lack of maturity, just all sorts of intangible stuff that kind of went sideways on Purdue last year that put them in that position they were in, where they probably would have missed the NCAA tournament had there been an NCAA tournament. I think, Purdue's got to grow up in a lot of ways. They've got to prove they've got sort of that competitive streak to them. I think it starts with the guards. I think, the guys coming back last year have to be better. Eric Hunter, Isaiah Thompson, and Sasha Stefanovic all did good things last year, but Purdue was not a good offensive team last year. And I think a lot of that had to do with guard play. Now there've been some moving parts during the offseason that could impact things for the better in terms of guys who've left, but also guys coming in. Jaden Ivey and Ethan Morton are the 2 freshmen who are basically jibe completely with what Purdue needs in terms of scoring punch, offensive savvy, whatever it may be. But the guards have to be better, and just across the board, Purdue has to be more mature, more competitive, more focused, more consistent, tougher, all of those things. And those aren't things we're normally talking about Purdue lacking as the season draws near, because they've been pretty consistent hallmarks of what Purdue is. But it's an unknown because of what happened last year, but also because of what's coming, is that, Purdue's got as many newcomers as they have returnees from last year. The 5 newcomers, true freshmen, Jaden Ivey, Ethan Morton, and Zach Edey. Zach Edey's going to play too, by the way.
Yeah.
And the 2 redshirts in Mason Gillis and Brandon Newman. You're basically overhauling half your team again. And the last time that happened was 2014 again. Things went really well that year. But it was largely because of a player like Rafael Davis taking the bull by the horns, being a leader, being sort of that catalyst of all of the things I just talked about, but also those 2014 freshmen being atypically mature, very low maintenance. And that's the model for what happens for Purdue this year, in the best case scenario, where the returnees grow up, they become leaders, all of that stuff. But then also the newcomers don't need to be led as much as a lot of newcomers often are during a college basketball season.
Brian, tell me, who are you most excited to see play? What player has you most jacked up and you're really eager to, when they roll the balls out there, to watch this kid?
Well, I think I'm most interested, is the way I'd put it, to see Jaden Ivey and Ethan Morton play. I mean, I think those are the 2 best guards Matt Painter has signed in a single recruiting class in his 15-plus seasons at Purdue. I think, as I said before, I think both of them speak directly to things Purdue needs desperately this season. I think, Purdue was a very flawed offensive team last year. I think they needed scorers. I think Jaden Ivey is a scorer through and through. They needed offensive savvy. They needed IQ. They needed passing. They needed offensive lubricant, as I call it. And I think Ethan Morton is basically biologically engineered to be that sort of player. He's kind of a savant-like passer and thinker of the game. And I think those guys, not only are they good enough to be immediate impact players, but I think they are both direct panaceas for exactly what held Purdue back last season and what Purdue needs to turn around in a big way this season. I think Jaden Ivey could be a star. I've said that since the first time I saw him play grassroots back last spring. And I've seen nothing to change my mind. I think he is one of the most talented offensive players Matt Painter's ever had at Purdue. I think Ethan Morton is basically set up like a golf ball on a tee to be one of Purdue fans' favorite players this season and for the 3 that follow it. And I think those guys could really, really swing a big stick this year in terms of affecting Purdue's season for the better.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting storyline to watch, and practice begins again this week, and we'll have a lot of coverage on the site. All right, Brian, thanks for your insight as always. We will take a 2-minute break and bring in Kelly Kitchell, also part of the 2000 Rose Bowl team and a sideline reporter for the Purdue Radio Network, etc. And we'll look forward to doing that as we take a short break on Golden Black Live.